Welcome to Insight, produced in partnership with ValleyPBS. Today we are chatting with Janelle Howard, Gallery Director of Arts Visalia, Colton Dennis, Executive Director of the Merced Arts Council, Michele Ellis Pracy, Director and Chief Curator of the Fresno Art Museum, and Bruce Kane, Executive Director of King's Arts Center. They have generously agreed to share some of their experience with us. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
So art, joy, a love of creation, being able to view the creation of others. Let's talk about art in this whole region of Central California and the role of each of your organizations in presenting art and in developing art. So let's start with you, Jenelle. Talk about the art that you present and the art that you help to create.
Arts Visalia is one of several organizations in Visalia, California. We are a nonprofit. We have a monthly exhibition that we change out every month, and then we also provide children's and adult art classes. So our mission is to promote the arts as central to the quality of life in our community, and we do that through educating, enriching, and engaging our community.
So who creates what you exhibit?
We have a wide variety of different artists that display their work every month, and they kind of submit artwork to us, and then we select from there through an exhibition committee.
So we create the art, isn't that right?
Mm-hmm. Our community does.
And then we view the art, and we enjoy the art, and we share the art, and you become the enabling platform for all that to happen.
Yes.
So Colton, you are the Executive Director of the Merced Arts Council. You're enabling these types of programs. Talk about the work of the Merced Arts Council.
Yeah, the Arts Council manages the Multicultural Arts Center in Merced. And through that, we showcase local and international artists through our galleries. We have classes. We have an enrichment program for adults with disabilities. That's all arts all the time, Monday through Friday. And our mission is to inspire and nurture arts and artists in our community, and create dialogue and community, and bring people together, make it a hub for the arts.
And Michele, you direct and you are the Chief Curator of the Fresno Art Museum. Talk about the challenges of running an art museum in a place like Fresno, and talk about your audiences.
The Fresno Art Museum is 69 years old. It has been in the same location in Central Fresno for all of those years. Started out as an art center, very modest, became an actual bona fide museum in '81, has had huge capital campaigns to build out this little cinder block building into a 30,000 square foot space. And we do have an international reputation built over those years for who we exhibit, which tend to be local, regional, and international artists. We do original exhibitions now that I'm there. We come up with our concepts, we curate our own shows, and they touch the hearts of anybody who walks in our door. Whether it's a child, we have a huge educational program. We have school children in our building every weekday from 9 to 3 or 4, and a classroom. And then we have 5 exhibition spaces, 5 galleries as well.
And Bruce, talk about the King's Arts Center.
So I think similar to all the other art centers represented here, our goal is to bring art to our communities through exhibit, through experience, and through education. So those are the 3 hallmarks that we strive for. We have a large children's program, and we have 2 exhibit spaces. We change out our show about 7 or 8 times a year in those 2 spaces. And I think you asked the challenges earlier, and I think the challenge, and maybe you guys agree, is that we're art centers in an agriculture-rich region. And while we strive to enrich the lives of our community through fine art, sometimes it's hard to convince a rural agriculture community that fine art has real value to our community and our place.
So let's engage with that. Let's talk about the value of fine art. The thing that always strikes me is that art really is an everyday event, right? If we listen to music, if we are sitting here talking, there's an art to communicating, there's a cadence to communicating, there's a rhythm to communicating. Sport is art in action. It just happens to have a different type of a venue. Is it any less than ballet? No, the skills are consonant with any physical type of performance. And yet we somehow make a distinction where we put art on it with, big letters and gold and so on, that somehow it's somehow estranged from us. What's going on in this society where, if you look at American furniture, if you look at the things that were created, the structures that were created, the implements that were created in our history, there's so much art that flows from Native Americans through the colonial period, through the revolutionary and the industrial period, but somehow we've created some sort of a distinction. What is going on here that we are satisfied with that dichotomy that you described?
Several things pop into my mind, but I think one thing is we have this tendency to limit art, that golden word that we put on walls of museums, to these two-dimensional things that only serve the purpose of visual experience. And whereas you describe, and I think rightly so, that art finds its way into so many avenues of expression in life. Whereas for Native Americans, the artistry of their rugs, their carpets, their blankets was everyday expression of artistic expression.
And everyday utility.
Everyday utility. We have somehow limited our idea of art to a more narrow definition, and that's a struggle.
How do we break those kinds of categories? Because in a sense, if we take a look at, for example, the discipline of directing a museum, of curating in a sense, it creates that separation because you're all of a sudden looking at objects devoid often from their cultural context. How do you create in Fresno an environment that encourages the embrace of art and not just sort of the antiseptic coming in and looking at something that is placed on a wall?
I very much believe that I just don't put out the art on the wall without writing a lot of wall text. So that if people want to learn the story and their experience will go deeper than just looking at something on the wall and wondering why, they have the information right there. And I'm an educator. That's what I am. And whether my exhibitions are purely sculptural or two-dimensional or thematic, or I have a painter from the Bay Area right now who does still life. I talk about the still life tradition. What does that mean? And also, I'm a true believer in the children. We are not, we don't turn our back on anybody. And when the children come through that museum, they may have never been in a museum in their lives, and they're in 7th grade. But they come to this museum, they have a classroom where they actually do a project based on the exhibitions that they see. They learn museum etiquette. They know how far to stand back from the wall. They know to keep their backpacks in front of them in their arms or leave them at the desk. No drinks and no water. So if they went to MoMA in New York, they would know, oh, I better leave my backpack, with coat check. I better not carry a pencil with me. So we are educators, whether it's cultural, aesthetic, social, responsible, and the children love it. They love it, and we start there. In this area of the country, that's where we start, is with the children, because the grown-ups come in already comfortable.
And you encourage the creation as well with the visits. There are also projects that are about
We have
creation.
a classroom, and so once they're finished with their experiences in the galleries, they go to the classroom and they actually take what they saw and learned and they make something from that.
And Colton, you also develop programs as well, but you don't necessarily have a museum to kickstart those programs with.
No, we have art galleries, and we do have exhibitions every 6 to 8 weeks that we put in something new, something that's local or something regional, or we're connected with, UC Merced is a new University of California, and because of them, we get artists coming through our area now. We get to get those kind of artists. Last year I had someone from Spain, a Spanish artist, that brought in her art, and it opened your mind to what art is, because this wasn't paintings on the wall, this was recycled material that was blown up and it took over the whole gallery. It floated in the air, and she made things that were kinetic, that when you passed by it, it would move, it would do something. And so it sparked a lot of conversation. Some of it thought it looked like trash, Some people were amazed how amazing, how cool it was that this thing would move. It was something that would look like a white trash bag. It would be almost like it was crinkled up. And then when you pass by it, it would blow up and start to breathe. And it would awe people how amazing that was. And young kids to the older generation. And that, to me, is what part of our job is too, is to open those boundaries up to what art is, because it is all kinds of things.
How do you make sure that people are aware that you don't have the same people who constantly are coming, that you're constantly refreshing your audience, is bringing in young people? How do you advocate for the idea of art and experiencing art?
Some of the ways that we reach out to people, because we have various age groups of the public. Social media attracts a lot of younger generation.
Do you make use of social media?
We do. We have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter every once in a while. We're not too adverse on that. And then we also have the newspaper, or essentially the newspaper itself, it's not necessarily going door to door. People are reading it online.
Right.
But we're still submitting these things to advertising agencies, to newspapers that are promoting it for us. So marketing in different ways is how we kind of reach the different age groups, because you're not necessarily going to reach an older generation on the social media.
So this requires a set of business skills, right? The first thing you have to do is look at your targets. You have to be able to do market segmentation. You have to understand who the cohorts are. And you have to know, for example, that younger people use Instagram and older people might use the traditional newspaper, even if they read it online, right? And then you have to shape a message that will appeal. And you have to get that out within enough time to front the exhibition or the event or the program that you're doing. And then when you have that interest, you have to capture that and convert it into something else, whether it's attendance or a paid ticket or whatever it happens to be. Do you find yourself dealing with the same issue?
Oh yeah, we use social media a lot. Luckily though, because of the UC, we have students that are kind of interns with all other nonprofits in our town, City of Merced, and they partnered up with the Art Center. And so I have a team of Merced, University, California Merced students that do the marketing of the social media. So the Instagram, the Twitter, and Facebook, I can give them certain projects, not everything, but certain things, and they're learning at the same time. But they're going towards their age group, which I want to connect with as well, right? And so they know what their age group would want, and so we've only been doing this for 2 years, but they've been doing a great job at that, of communicating what we want to try to communicate through their way of communicating, through their social media.
So you're co-opting your audience to become advocates for more audience.
I think that with volunteers as well, right? The more people we include, the more they talk about it. The more they say, hey, there's someone out of town, you need to come to the Art Center, you need to check it out. The more people we have included, the more they communicate what is available, because they're a part of it. They have a buy-in to what's going on. And so they want to include their friends and family as well.
And I agree with my colleagues. Facebook is huge. To move to a new city of 700,000 people, to a museum that had been around for 67 years, and being totally new to the scene, I needed to start reaching out, cementing the future of the organization. So Facebook, I do that myself. I do that at night, on the weekends. Anything that needs to be put on Facebook comes my way. I have a PR person. We do an e-blast newsletter every week or every 2 weeks to over 5,000 people across the country, not just regionally. And we do mailings constantly for people who love things in the mailbox, because we have a lot of older people who've supported this museum for 69 years. So when you are a destination and you are an island, basically, of culture, you have to bring people to you.
And that marketing and communication skill and the financial management skill is so important. If you take a look around any town, not just this town, you see movie theaters that are all closed. Those are businesses that fail to attract audiences. Retail outlets that fail, department stores, grocery stores that fail to attract. But these cultural institutions, they exist because the business acumen
That's right.
in their sector of their leaders.
That's right.
Of their leaders. So when you take a look at what is going on at your organization, how do you ensure that you connect with your audience and that dialogue is not just a one-off where people come and then they've sort of experienced, but that's it? How do you create stickiness?
I think that question is why we all have jobs, right? We have to create that stickiness and make sure. Otherwise, someone could just slap the art on the walls and walk away, and it would take care of itself.
Right, you see it once and you've seen it. You don't have to come back.
Right. I was recently, my first opportunity to see the Louvre in Paris, and I was astounded by the difference between the way that tourists experienced that building and the way locals experienced that building. There were groups of locals who were sitting on the floor sketching from a Raphael piece,
right,
and working in the midst of museum space. There were little clatches of locals who were sitting and talking and just enjoying community in the midst of that
right.
space. And we're a destination. We go to look at the art and walk away. So
it's background noise. If you're a local, it's background noise, but it's such wonderful background noise.
Right.
Would that we all had such
It's
art
essential
to
to
be.
life.
That's right.
Right.
That's
There.
So I think, part of our jobs is that strategic thinking. How do we create a variety of events that draw people into new experiences with art and with artists? And I think experiencing the artist, talking about that artist who brought reused items into the space. She's telling a story, or he's telling a story, and getting our visitors engaged with that person and their story and their point makes art so much more meaningful and gives us a chance to draw them into the next story, the next meaningful experience.
I love the point that you made about the Louvre and how people who are local experience a museum, because to me, what that's saying is that your intention for your institution, and perhaps it's the intention that you all have, is to make the institution, the idea of art and being around art, to be so routine that it just is part of everyday life.
Yeah.
You're not.
It enriches us constantly.
Right,
You
and
need it.
you can pay attention to a particular work, but it doesn't have to be this all-encompassing thing. You can have a café clutch with some in front of an artwork and glance at it a little bit, and maybe it grabs your attention that day, but maybe it's tomorrow, but you're always there and it's always around you.
Right.
How do you transform the urban environment? If you explode the walls of institutions and you look at rural and rural environments, how do you bring art outside of the walls of structures, your gallery structures, your museum, and so on? How do you create that sensibility, trying to fulfill what Bruce described as sort of the art in the everyday and that everyday conversant aspect of being part of that creation?
The most important thing for you to be is relevant to your community. However you manipulate that, mold that, create that, be relevant to them, or they're not going to care. They're not going to make you part of living and breathing and experiencing their daily life. So that's been a real cause for me in my position, is to be relevant to my community. We do a fashion show every other year, which is a huge fundraiser called
How
Trash
do you
Chic.
do a fashion show? You've got so many different cultures, right?
We-
you have so
we
many
open
different
it up to the
languages. How does
community.
that work?
All the artists in the community who wish to make fashion out of recycled materials, we work with them over a year period, and they present portfolios. We try to bring in a mix of culture and ages.
Do you have a
and
judging process?
and they bring in we bring in models. We have a model call. This year we could have been Fashion Week in New York City. We rented an airplane hangar, and it brought in about $65,000, which is a good chunk of change. Typically, it used to bring in like 35, but we involve the whole community, and the artists know we care about them. The people that support us love the event, so they pay for their dinner. It's joyful when we can break down the walls and be a community organization and not just what's inside.
Sometimes it's also putting yourself in someone else's environment. So you're reaching out, but you're going to local baseball game and you're promoting the arts there, or you're going to the farmer's market and you're doing kids projects at the farmer's market. So you're kind of putting yourself in the world that they see and integrating art that way.
You're taking the columns down, you're taking the gold gilt off of the letters, you're making art be part of the ballpark. You're making art be part of the market. you're actually exploding the walls that the arts have sometimes placed between themselves and their audience. How do you make sure that funding works? Each of you have your different, yes, I know, big sigh.
It's a strategy.
Big sigh. How do you, because you have contributed revenue certainly, there are earned income elements that attach to various services and programs that you have. How does that work for you, for example?
So it's multi-tiered. I mean, luckily I can apply for grants from the California Arts Council. We get some grants. Membership dues from members of the community. But you know, our galleries are free to the public. Right. So it's free Tuesday through Saturday. And you know, the thing is, we need the funding somehow. So it's up to the public to kind of have ownership of that. You know, this is their art center.
Right.
And even though it's free, it's not free. I mean, we still have to pay the bills. I mean, summertime, the air conditioning now, it's like I have to pay, it's almost, you know, up to $30,000 for the whole summer to pay for the air conditioning and the lighting and all that kind of stuff that goes on in the art center. You can't just turn it off.
106? No way.
So, you know, it's always
melt.
communicating to the public how important it is, and that, you know, what if we weren't here anymore? What would you do? I mean, my focus has been on the Art Center to make it a hub. And it's not always art. Sometimes it's some political event, sometimes it's some forum, health fair, but it's immersed in art. You know, so they might be going to a certain event that has nothing really to do with the arts, but then they see something that's there, and then they get, you know, then they want to know more. You know, what else is available to us? And you know, we also you know, have concerts and stuff, and we have, one time we had this in our galleries, very traditional art from our Arbor Gallery, a co-op of artists, local artists, and they sell their art in a lot of watercolors, a lot of, you know, acrylic, a lot of landscape, a lot of cows, you know, in our area, and we had one night a heavy metal rock band playing. And the arbor gallerist or artist stayed because they thought, well, who knows, maybe someone want to buy our art. And that was the biggest night they had. And it was the heavy metal bands, the musicians themselves that saw the art that they loved. They connected somehow. And, you know, something that you wouldn't think, you know, maybe it would jive, and it did. These guys loved the pieces of art that they bought, and that was a great thing for our artists, our local artists.
How do you ensure that your constituents own the problem, your communities own the problem of keeping art alive?
It's building relationships. I mean, when we all walked into our institutions not having been part of them before. At least I moved here for this job. And so I needed to start forging relationships. And I treat Fresno like a small town in a big city. 700,000 people live here. There's no way I can touch all of those people. But I do find out who cares, and I do cultivate those people. And they become friends of the museum and friends of the cause for culture. And it's a process. I wasn't given a chunk of change and said, go do what you want, we trust you. I've had to raise it as I go. And I raise it to support the kinds of programs I think are relevant to this community. And it's a handful. I mean, we have some major donors. We have a membership that's cultivated constantly and renewed constantly. We write grants. We have no city, state, or federal money, none. It's private individuals, private family foundations, and the community at large.
So is it a combination of constant advocacy, opportunism, trying to figure out a way to create earned income experiences, try to figure out a way to cross-fertilize, writing grants?
And being worthy of their money. We have to be worthy.
Because we are stewards of the arts.
We are stewards of the arts, we're stewards of their money.
That's right.
And as a nonprofit, we are responsible to those people.
I've found that one of the principles, and there's a lot of them, that's important, is we have to keep local artists engaged, working, collaborating, because when it's your neighbor who's exhibiting art, there's more investment, there's more connection, there's more story to that. And that helps our local people see the value of keeping their neighbor working, keeping their neighbor exhibiting, keeping their neighbor engaged. So for those of us who are local art centers, it's really important to be able to cultivate the working artists in our own communities, to be exhibitors, to be their own best spokespeople for the arts in the neighborhood, and to become partners with them. That's just one of the principles that I think are really significant for us.
So important to have a vital arts ecosystem here. It so improves everyone's lives. Bruce, Michele, Colton, and Janelle, thank you so much for sharing the work of King's Arts Center, the Fresno Art Museum, the Merced Arts Council, and Arts Visalia. Thank you so much for explaining the world that you inhabit, and thank you so much for your
Thank you
insights.
for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.